that impact our lives. We will seek out extraordinary and ordinary people who have done extraordinary things. Facilitators, educators, and entrepreneurs will be invited to inspire and enlighten our listeners. Join Anwar Moolla for an interactive show and find out what really matters in business.
نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته 16 minutes past 7 on a Monday evening, the 2nd of June. Yes, we into the month of June already. It's the Business Matters program with me, Anwar Moolla, as it is every Monday evening. Business Matters tonight, a very action-packed program. I'm going to introduce my two guests that are joining us virtually. It's a Standard Bank program tonight, so to speak. And with that, it's a very, very warm welcome to Julian Felix. Julian is the head sector specialist, specialized lending, Standard Bank. Julian, just correct me if I've got that wrong, but a very warm welcome to you to the Business Matters program.
Thank you, Anwar.
Okay. Julian, did I get that right? Head sector specialist, specialized lending, Standard Bank.
That's correct.
Thanks, but just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been a Standard Banker for about 20 years. I have the privilege of leading a team of specialists who look after, amongst others, agriculture, public sector, franchising, energy infrastructure, mining, the accounting and healthcare sectors as well. So I've got a full plate, and I really enjoy my job. Thank you.
Okay. Julian, the topic for tonight is mining, agriculture, and energy. Where is South Africa headed? So we're going to pick your brain on some of those things. But also, we are also in the capable hands of DEEROSH MAHARAJ, also from Standard Bank, and he's the executive head of energy, infrastructure, and mining. So with that, it's very warm welcome to DEEROSH.
Thank you, Anwar, and we're truly grateful that you have us on this show. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in as well.
Okay, DEEROSH. DEEROSH, tell us a little bit about yourself. You obviously have a very critical and important role at Standard Bank. So a little bit about your studies, your qualifications, and what you do really at Standard Bank.
Happy to do that, Anwar. Thanks for the question. So I've been with Standard Bank now touching on 13 years. I'm a banker by nature, finance background in terms of studies. But during my journey within the bank, my interests were piqued by, the sector environment. I started off focusing in the sectors around renewable energy, and I've transitioned to look after these three critical sectors. So that's a short synopsis of my background.
Okay, excellent. We in the capable hands of two gentlemen that between them have 33 years of experience. So I'm sure they're going to lead us down the correct path. And South Africa has, so DEEROSH, if I can start with you, South Africa has always been known as a resources economy, a resources-based country. We've been blessed and fortunate in that we have lots of natural resources. Gold, platinum, copper come to mind, but a lot more than that. And I think that's where your focus is at Standard Bank. South Africa, the South African economy has long relied on mining, agriculture, and energy. And again, our climate is also excellent for a lot of the agriculture-related stuff. How would you describe the current state of these sectors in terms of growth and sustainability?
Anwar, thanks for the question. That's an excellent question. On the agricultural side, I'll segue to Julian after I complete my feedback, where I give you my views on this, because he's closer to the agricultural sector. But I can give you a fair overview. So, as you mentioned, and rightfully so, the economy is heavily dependent on these three sectors. So if you look primarily at the contribution to GDP and also the impact on employment that these sectors have. The importance is undeniable, right? So you have two interesting variables you've highlighted here in your question: energy and food. And from a sector perspective, and very recently we've been talking a lot about this. We normally bring in a third variable, which is water, and we talk about the water, energy, food nexus, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard about. And when you look at that collective value chain, it's extremely important collectively when you think about what a nation needs to thrive, and as a result, what an economy needs to thrive. So generally, we look at that collectively because they inextricably connected. Now, when you hone into energy specifically, what we've seen, and this doesn't necessarily need an introduction because I think it's the topic around energy is quite well, very topical still, and cost and supply have been the looming challenges that South Africans and businesses in South Africa have faced. There's a third variable we're seeing, and it's a global driver that we see coming through, and that's linked to sustainability. So, from an energy perspective, those are the three main drivers that we see driving that environment, and cost and supply have driven a lot of the alternatives, growth in the alternatives over the past couple of years. Supply, we've seen some relief in terms of supply recently. We had the year of 2024 with barely any load shedding, and that has had a positive impact. And if we listen to the comments from the utility, I think there are still challenges. They're doing their best to keep up and keep the lights on, but at the end of the day, we know there's a lot of maintenance and there's a lot of aging infrastructure that still requires rapid attention. So we may see challenges there emerging in the coming years, but for now they seem to be keeping that quite well intact. However, costs are a very real factor. And we always speak about this very practically. When you talk about a business and you talk about increase in double digits, I mean, you're touching on 13% in the last round of increases. In a sub-inflationary, yes, sorry, Anwar.
Is that what it's been, about 13%?
Yes, just under 13%. That's the last increase.
Is that wages?
No, that's that's the cost of energy. That's what the increase in power has gone up by. So
Okay.
you see that increase, and you see that in a sub-inflationary environment where inflation sits closer to 3%.
All right.
Businesses are finding it harder and harder to pass on those costs. So it's placing some businesses that are in margin-sensitive environments under immense pressure. So that's driven this route to alternatives quite rapidly, because the case for renewables has been growing in appeal over the years. Now, when you bring in that third factor of sustainability, it adds a whole new dynamic, because now you're looking at an environment where you have not just the cost and supply concerns, but you have an environment where if you are exporting products, you are being scrutinized as to whether your products are green enough. And in some instances, like when you look at the structures that are being put in place in Europe, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is the most famous one we talk about. These mechanisms are becoming very punitive to businesses that want to export. So sustainability and carbon impact is becoming, well, it's presenting challenges, but it also presents a lot of opportunities for businesses. So that's the energy space. When you think about mining, I think we've mentioned it's a large contributor to GDP. And mainly because I think when you think about mining and you think about the economic and social impact, that's the, when you see mining contract and you see the impact it has on jobs as an example, it's a serious concern, and it's something that needs a lot of consideration. And particularly concerning when you think about the fact that mining has, from what we've observed, it has contracted year on year. And when we link this to to a cause and effect. It's mainly due to logistics challenges, specifically port and rail. And there's a large element of energy costs as well that are impacting competitiveness of some of the commodities. But I don't want to steal away from Julian's opportunity to speak about agriculture. So I think hopefully that covers it well from an energy and mining perspective, Anwar.
It has, but I've got a few questions for you related to that. But let's turn to Julian and let him give us a take on the agricultural sector.
Yes, Anwar, and whilst when you look at economic metrics, you'll see that agriculture makes up about 4%, 5% of KZN's GDP. But I'd caution that, because everyone needs to thank a farmer for what they eat today. So whilst its contribution may not be big, it's a significant employer. Many households rely on subsistence farming to feed themselves. We have the sugarcane industry, we have the forestry industry, we have livestock farming that are predominant around KZN. So for us, a very important sector. As costs have increased, many farmers have moved towards smart and more intelligent ways of farming, regenerative practices, as an example. So
Julian, before you go further, you talk about 4 to 5% of KZN's economy or GDP, but we always going to be your very poor cousins down here in KZN. You guys are sitting up in Gauteng. That's where the money is, always has been. So we are poor cousins down here.
So I'd like to say I'm one of your poor cousins. I'm also in KZN.
Okay.
Yeah. So but I would, as soon as you leave the city lights, you're in agricultural world, right? So right. It's really critical to the success of any economy is the ability to feed its nation, and I think that's the basis on which we see agriculture, and the way we look at assisting our customers who are in farming as they transition to newer and more intelligent ways of farming. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, coming back to you, DEEROSH.
Yes.
We spoke about the challenges and energy being one, and then infrastructure in terms of rail, etc., being the other one. Now, we can put the blame for these challenges purely in the hands of government, because they should ensure that you have your infrastructure in place. And again, from an energy perspective, we know the history, we know the story with ESCOM, and you alluded to the 13% increase that's coming through, and we know the mining sector relies very, very heavily on energy, and without that they literally cannot operate, and they cannot provide all of their own resources as much as they're trying to be sustainable. So surely the mining sector, the big companies that are there, are in discussion with government on these matters all the time.
Yeah, so Anwar, I think, the good thing that we're seeing, especially in recent years, high levels of collaboration between government and corporate SA. And, we see the political will, and we see positive signs around what is intended. But, the reality is that these things take a while to change. Legislation takes time to be passed. Policies, support structures that are intended do take time to come to pass. So in the interim, it's important for us to figure out how do we bridge that gap, and how do we actually solve for these challenges. And I think that's of serious interest to us as a financial institution, as Standard Bank.
Okay, Julian, last year was a tough one in the agriculture space. There was a drought which affected large parts of the country, and how is it looking this year? From your perspective, speaking to your customers, have the rains been better? Have the crops started to look better? Are we more optimistic going into harvesting season?
Yes, and I think commodity prices have also been positive towards our customers. Export markets, much of our produce is exported, and I think whilst some would bemoan the current exchange rates, that has played very favorably towards our farmers. So in my personal opinion, I do believe that the market is definitely looking a lot more positive. I'm quite au fait with the macadamia industry. Whilst we haven't seen a huge increase in the macadamia prices, customers are now trading a lot more profitably than they were a couple of years ago.
Okay, interesting to hear that. I think the Chinese were big importers of South African macadamia. If I get that correct, I don't know if they've. And then when COVID came, that kind of went out of the window. I'm not sure if the Chinese have started buying South African macadamia again.
There's still a large market for South Africa. Also, interestingly enough, the United States is a big importer for some of their goods, and so tariffs play a role there, as well as the European Union is also a big off-taker of our nuts and
Julian.
fruit.
So, Julian, the big monkey in the room, if you want to call it that, is the tariffs. You spoke about tariffs. We're all in the hands of a certain President Trump in that respect, and I think some sanity is prevailing compared to a couple of weeks ago. How badly can we be affected if our status in terms of AGOA is withdrawn? Because I would think that can have a very negative impact on us.
Yeah, I guess AGOA and our trade relations are very important to us, and I guess the attempt by the South African government to mend those trade relationships is very positive for us. How that plays out is yet to be seen, but I think the world is in a tricky space at the moment as these trade negotiations are ongoing.
I love your diplomacy, Julian. DEEROSH, turning to you, we had the situation from our fiscus perspective up to a couple of weeks ago, where there was a possibility that our VAT rate would have gone up to fund our deficit. That fortunately was not put through, and we were all spared that 2% increase, even though it was going to be phased in. But what it tells us is that the revenue side is battling, and a large percentage of that revenue does come from the mining sector, where you are the specialist. So the question is that we're seeing gold at an all-time high. We're seeing platinum at a 2-year high. Obviously, revenue from those sectors should be better. The balance sheets for those mining companies should look a lot better. Why are we battling to raise money for the fiscus when we expect that, based on the high gold price and other commodity prices, our revenue should be that much better? I mean, surely government can benefit or should be benefiting from these and pass out some of that benefit to the private sector.
So Anwar, overall, so our exposure, our experience is really limited to the small to medium enterprise environment. But like I mentioned earlier, when you look at mining overall, while these prices and the market looks generally so overall, we are, you mentioned this earlier, we are endowed, we're a resource-rich country, we're a resource-rich continent, right?
Absolutely.
In South Africa specifically, we are, in a fortunate position to have a lot of these resources that you mentioned, being gold, the platinum group minerals. We also hold a majority of the resources globally when it comes to chrome and when it comes to manganese. But the reality is we have seen a contraction in the market. So while the theory will indicate that we should see substantial revenue flows from this, the mining sector has actually contracted year on year. And due to these logistics challenges mainly, we've seen in the SME market specifically, there aren't challenges in the demand. If you look at coal specifically, there aren't
Right.
challenges in demand for coal, but there are challenges in getting the product out of the country. So there's
Right.
sufficient demand, but you're unable to get your product out. So miners have actually slowed down their productions. They've actually laid off employees, and that's how far-reaching the impact is when our logistics infrastructure is not supportive enough. So that's a major, major challenge. And I think while we expect to see those revenue flows, and if all of that was in place, it'll probably unleash organically a lot of the benefits from the mining sector. Those are the major drivers. I mentioned earlier that we're also facing the challenge of energy costs, placing us, energy supply and energy costs, placing us in an uncompetitive environment globally. So with certain of these commodities, we're becoming uncompetitive because if you look at China's ability to and the cost at which they're producing energy and what they are able to mine and process these minerals at, we're struggling with that as well. So there's those factors that come into play, and I think those are the contributors to the contraction we've seen. And as a result, not the revenue flows you'd expect to see.
Yeah, but DEEROSH, we sometimes become our own worst enemies, right? So blame it on corruption, blame it on other factors, inefficiencies. We can't get our coal through to the port efficiently. We can't get it through on time, and we are now facing a situation whereby workers have to be laid off simply because the demand is there, but we can't get it through to port on time. What are we doing to address these challenges? Because surely, if demand is there, we need to do something to make sure that demand is met.
So Anwar, we mentioned earlier that the discussions are ongoing, right?
Right.
When you think about the government working to try and figure out what the path, the best path is to solve for these issues, in consultation with a lot of these miners, there are plans that especially when it comes to the rail infrastructure. You've heard of the discussions of trying to bring on private operators to try and upgrade, and but these are early stage discussions. And the reality is we need a lot more of a dynamic approach. And I think there are many work streams underway. When we speak to operators, your junior miners in the small to medium enterprise space, a lot of them are exploring various options, various types of contracts to try and alleviate these challenges. But Anwar, the truth is it is very tough. It's a very, very tough environment to navigate. When you speak to our clients, you often see that they're struggling to actually get solutions to these challenges. And hopefully, with all the discussions that are underway and all of the efforts that are being put in collectively, we will see something positive coming out of these efforts in the coming months and years. But it's the beauty about South Africa, though, and the South African entrepreneur is that we are resilient individuals. So I think that the advantage we have is that we won't give up at this. And as financial organizations, as entrepreneurs, and as government, I think we will find a solution.
Okay, Julian, I'm going to pose that same question to you before we go for an ad break. you dealing in agriculture, and we know that agriculture stuff goes off, if it's lying in the wrong place for too long. You have a challenge with citrus being exported out of this country. I mean, we've heard of incidents where citrus has been lying, for example, in Durban port and has gone off because of the challenges with infrastructure. How are the farmers or the people in the agricultural space reacting and to these type of challenges?
I think the first thing I'll say, Anwar, is farmers are extremely resilient individuals, right?
Plan is that's the old terminology we've heard.
Yes, exactly. And I have the privilege of working across KZN and in Mpumalanga, really big agricultural hubs. And so what farmers do is as they look at, for example, where there are port challenges, they look at alternatives. So they may ship their produce down to Cape Town. They may try and export through the Maputo port. So I guess whilst we see the challenges from an infrastructure point of view, farmers are extremely resilient. In dire instances, we've seen farmers, for example, in the citrus industry, just leaving their produce and not spending any money to take the produce off the trees in that particular season, and that was a couple of years ago, as restrictions and the market was just not favorable to them. So I think for me the resilience is one of the aspects that stands out for farmers. They don't only diversify their markets, they also diversify the commodities in which they farm. So not only livestock, but also your maize, as an example. So the revenue streams generally are diversified. Those are the good farmers, and there's a large domestic market that is a big off-taker of our produce. So it's not only reliant on exports. So that's what I think your boermarkeplan analogy is probably the best way to describe it.
Okay, gentlemen, we're going to take an ad break, but when I come back, I'm going to pose this question to you guys, which you can think about. Is that, considering all of these challenges we have, how easy is it for you guys as bankers to convince people from the outside, from people from out of this country, to put money into this country, be it in agriculture, be it in mining, be it in renewables? So we're going to leave you to ponder on that as we go for an ad break.
Radio Ansaar.
This segment is brought to you by Kenfield Auto, your RMI approved service and repair specialist. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Kenfield Auto.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. ربنا أنزل علينا مائدة من السماء تكون لنا عيدا لأولنا وآخرنا وآية منك وارزقنا وأنت خير الرازقين.
I won't start.
Kenfield Auto.
Noisy brakes.
Kenfield Auto.
Due for a service.
Kenfield Auto. Kenfield Auto, the answer to all your car problems. Your service and repair specialist for your VW, Audi, Suzuki, Toyota, or just about any vehicle. Kenfield Auto, your RMI and insurance approved workshop to handle them all. 236 Brickfield Road, Overport. Call us on 031 207 2399. Kenfield Auto.
Butterlicious, butterlicious, butterlicious. When the food melts in my mouth, so does my heart. Blended by our expert chefs with pure cotton seed oil. Divine lasts longer, so cook more with Divine. Divine makes every meal a special treat. It is butterlicious. Approved as part of the Heart and Stroke Foundation Eating Plan, Cotton Mark SA, and a proudly South African product, Divine Cooking Oil. But delicious.
لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك.
Audio stream across the world on radioalansar.co.za.
Business Matters.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you've just joined us, Radio Al Ansar is the place to be. You on the Business Matters program with me, Anwar Moolla. And the Business Matters program is brought to you by the Minara Chamber of Commerce. Lovely being in the studio. Lovely having two very esteemed guests with me, both from Standard Bank. We've been talking to Julian FELIX, Head Sector Specialist, Specialized Lending, Standard Bank, and DEEROSH MAHARAJ, Executive Head of Energy, Infrastructure and Mining. Gentlemen, before we went on that ad break, I posed a question, which is how easy or difficult is it to get people to put money into this country, considering all of the challenges we have? So, DEEROSH, let's start with you. Give us your input.
So, Anwar, I'm going to start with mining. So mining, linking to the earlier sentiments and what I've shared, if you look at South Africa, the investment hasn't been, and so I'm going to make the comparison between South Africa and Africa as a continent. Now, if you look at the investment that's gone into Africa, outside the African countries outside of South Africa, there's been billions poured in an investment, right? When you look at South Africa, like I mentioned, it's a contraction year on year. So that indicates immediately, right, that, like I said, there's a lot of hard work that needs to be completed to make sure that this is a conducive environment for investment. There's massive opportunity here, Anwar. When you look at, the fact that where we sit, the minerals we sit with, the demand for those minerals, and also the opportunity, as government's been speaking a lot about this recently, around the beneficiation of these minerals and the opportunity it provides to mining companies and to also small to medium enterprises within the mining sector. I think there's a good case going for it. If we can solve the issues that are strangling this economy, that is in many ways a caged animal trying to break free. That's sort of the best analogy I can use to describe mining. In the energy space, however, in contrast, we've seen a lot of investment, from businesses, corporate businesses coming in, investing in energy, in the renewable space. And renewables alternatives have been is the area that's attracted the most investment. You see a lot of openness in this environment. I mean, it's an environment that's evolving at a rapid pace. I don't think any sector in the economy has seen this level of change and this dynamic change in such a short period of time. If you just think of the 10 years and how this narrative is changing. So I think energy, an easier topic to discuss when it comes to investment and attracting investment. I also think that the technology, if you look at the energy space and you look at how technology elements have moved in favor of the renewable space. Solar PV as an example, 2 years back, the cost of a solar panel was twice what it is now. So you're seeing an element of Moore's law coming into play there. And we've also seen, we were expecting to see a drop in prices in batteries again year on year. And we've seen it steadily dropping around 25 to 30% year on year. year on year, in the last period change, we've seen a 60% drop. So, a very strong case for energy, and we're seeing that investment coming in the energy
Excellent.
sector.
Julian, from your perspective in agriculture, how do you see it?
I thought about it through the break, and I think there's three points I'd like to make, Anwar. The first one is our position, right? So South Africa is attractive because we have access to the EU markets, the Americas, as well as the China and Asia markets. So we're centrally located, and that, I think, is a big plus for South Africa. I think if you look secondly at the nature of South Africa and the vast land we have, it's diverse, diverse from the crops that you can plant, diverse from the temperate climate that we have, and also access to water. So I think that's the third, the second reason I'd say it'd be attractive. And thirdly, whilst we may bemoan the strain that our infrastructure is under, it still has an infrastructure that can allow goods to be dispersed through different ports. We have our energy systems under strain, but we are moving towards smarter agriculture, moving towards sustainable agricultural methods, sustainable farming methods. Where, for example, as DEEROSH had mentioned, solar PV, we see many farmers not moving off the grid, but having grid-tied solutions, which allows them to supplement their energy requirements and really put take the cost savings and push that into their businesses to be more sustainable and more profitable. So those would be my sort of three reasons as to why I'm still very positive around SA Inc.
Okay, Julian, staying in that line, I mean, agriculture faces high climate risks and land reform uncertainties, which is something that we cannot ignore. I can give you my personal example. A couple of years ago, I went to Zimbabwe, and we were driving from Harare to Kariba Dam because we were going to spend a weekend on a houseboat. And my friend from Zimbabwe kept pointing out barren land on each side of the road we were traveling on, and said at one stage this land used to produce the best roses in the world. These roses were being sold at Harrods in London, and today it's just barren land. I mean, dust. And then he said this was a cotton field, and then this was a wheat field, and all of that had turned to dust when the Zimbabwe made a decision to kick out its farmers, so to speak, and transfer that land to the disadvantaged population. Unfortunately, I mean, I hope it doesn't happen here. That led to the demise of the agricultural sector to a huge extent. Now Zimbabwe is asking those very farmers to come back and take over those lands again after many years. Are we not going and making the same mistake? And I can quote you an example. I was in Cape Town a week and a half ago, and I was driving between Cape Town and a little town called Claremont, and I was going through a town called Citrusdal, and then again a friend of mine pointed out and said there was lots and lots of apples growing here, and now this land is lying barren because the government took it away, and the new owners of the land have wasted the opportunity. They took the apple trees, cut them down, and used the wood for firewood. We're sitting with this reality. I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot, Julian, but address some of those concerns for me.
Yeah. So the issue of land claims is always top of mind, right? And typically most of the funding we do is where properties are bonded, and we have taken a business as usual approach, and we do comply with the terms of the Land Act. And as it stands, land claims have not restricted the growth in the sector. We've had land claims as a function of our environment for many years, and there are processes in place, to follow when it comes to land transfer and developments in relation to the Land Act. So in my personal opinion is that the business continuity has been there, and I think to a large extent our agricultural industry is very sound, despite these headwinds that may be perceived. I think that's where I stand.
Okay, DEEROSH, I'm going to turn back to you. You guys are bankers at the end of the day, so you got to make a decision that's good for the bank. From a banking perspective, how viable is it to fund South Africa's transition from coal to renewable, particularly given the regulatory delays and the grid infrastructure issues?
Anwar, a very good question. I think it is viable, given the understanding that we need to establish what the optimal energy mix for the country will look like, right? And I think we are working constantly towards that picture. But Anwar, context is needed. Renewables are a must, right? We need to move in this direction, and the case for this is becoming more and more appealing, as I mentioned earlier. Technology improves and investment in this area continues to peak. However, this is a long journey, and we can't ignore the fact that South Africa sits in a certain part of its life cycle as a developing nation. And it has short-term needs. And we can't transition overnight, right? So that can't be ignored. So while we are a resource-rich country, and given the energy required to grow the economy in the short term, as I mentioned, we can't flip a switch and shut down our reliance on fossil fuels overnight. So I think that is a context that's needed, and we have to constantly go back to the drawing board and assess where we are, assess what's possible, assess what's needed, and plan accordingly and execute accordingly. From a regulatory and infrastructure perspective, there's a lot of water that still needs to run under the bridge. And I think we are making good progress in that regard. I do think it is viable, but I think that's the context that's required.
Okay, gentlemen, we've got 2 minutes left before we shut the program. I'm going to pose the same question to both of you. Your closing remarks, but where do you believe South Africa should be placing its strategic bets in the next decade to unlock real economic value from mining, agriculture, and energy? DEEROSH, let's start with you.
Very, very happy to, I've got my view around this, keeping my ear to the ground. I think energy and mining are interlinked in this regard. So we are a resource-rich continent. We endowed with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which we do not make enough use of. Right? Batteries are the future of energy. There's a huge drive for beneficiation. Everything we need is within what I refer to as God's land, being Africa. And I think that, if we are to really, really place our bets, it's going to be on the battery sector and the critical minerals that are required for that and the beneficiation value chain that sits around that.
Thank you so much, DEEROSH. Julian, some parting comments from you. We can go on chatting. I think this topic needs a lot more time, but give me some of your parting remarks, Julian.
Thank you, Anwar, and your listeners for affording us the opportunity. When I think about agriculture and the transition that agriculture is going around smart practices, regenerative farming, precision farming, the use of renewables, I do think our reliance on nature is declining, and I think we are becoming a lot more sustainable. And I think that also gives the opportunity for young and emerging farmers to take up that mantle, better yields, and feeding our nation. So I think for me, the agricultural environment is is adapting very quickly to the change in climate, the change in geopolitical tensions, and all those kind of headwinds that we face. So I'm extremely optimistic around agriculture. As an example, tomorrow I'm visiting a site where there's about 20 hectares of farming that will be done in greenhouses using solar PVs. That's 20 megawatts of electricity that's being used to generate intensive farming that's going to help feed the village right next to it. So I'm extremely optimistic about us as South Africans finding innovative solutions to the problems that we face.
Excellent. DEEROSH Maharaj and Julian Felix, both from Standard Bank, thank you so much for joining me this evening on a really interesting discussion. Hope to see you guys sometime soon in the studio here in Durban. Please do visit us when you guys are here, and we'll have another discussion around the mining, agriculture, and energy space. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And with that, it's wassalamu alaikum from me for another week. And inshallah, I'll join you next week, Monday, for another interesting Business Matters program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Business Matters.